Hi everyone, Jessica here and welcome back to my channel. So today's video we've got another card making challenge video, and we're going to be creating a blue Distress Oxide background, and then we're going to turn that into a card. So for today's video, like I said, we're going to go with the blue theme. So we're going to be using this Ranger. So these are the Tim Holtz Distress Oxide inks. So I've got Salty Ocean and I've got a Waterprint Sketch. So what we're going to be doing is using these two inks. We're just going to do a really simple bit of background blending. So these inks react really well with water. So we're just going to be sort of creating a pattern on top of this sort of blended background, and we're going to create something that I think that's really cool. So as you can see, I'm just sort of laying down the colour at the moment, and I'm just using my blending brushes. I'm not too worried about sort of getting the blend perfect, because we're going to be, like I said, using some water to create a really fun pattern within these sort of ink blends. So like I said, I'm not too worried about sort of getting it too perfect, but I'm just kind of doing a gradient effect, going from the darker Blueprint Sketch and then into the lighter Salty Ocean colour. So you can see I'm sort of laying it down quite thick, because I want to make sure that you can really see the sort of pattern that we're going to be putting into these inks. So you can see just with my right hand where I'm holding the paper down, I've just using a post-it note, just so I don't get any fingerprints or any sort of marks or anything in the Salty Ocean side of the paper. So I think this is just a good little trick, just a regular old post-it note or something that's got a little bit of stick to it, and that'll just sort of prevent you, like I said, from having any sort of marks or anything in your background or in your ink. So you can see here I'm just sort of blending them really nicely just in the middle, like I said, to give it that nice sort of gradient effect. So the only other tools to create the particular kind of background that we are creating today is just some water and sort of a piece of string or twine. Perhaps you can try this with different kinds of ribbon or lace and see what kind of effects that you can create. So there's my background all finished. So I'm just going to move my sort of blending tray sort of out of the way. So you can see here I've just got a piece of sort of cotton, the type of, it's almost a bit like thread, and I'm just sort of dipping it into the water that I've got next to me. So I don't want my string to be sort of dripping wet to cause any sort of droplets on my background. But all I'm going to do is make my string really taut. So this has gone into the water, so it has got water set on the surface, and I'm just kind of putting it down on top of my inky background. So like I said, I'm keeping it taut, and I'm just kind of rubbing certain areas into the background, and then the water on the string is going to react with the ink, and it's just going to lift that colour slightly. So as you can see there, it's not sort of hit down on right across the card, so it's just giving you nice sort of little breaks, and then obviously you can go in and just sort of press down the twine or the sort of ribbon or whatever it is that you're using, just to kind of get a sort of fuller look. So all we're going to do is keep repeating this process, and this will just create us a really nice sort of patterned and a really easy background. So you can see here with this one, I'm sort of holding it a little longer down. It's got a little bit more water on this one, so the line sort of becomes a little bit thicker, and you can see that water sort of just sat on top where that ink has sort of come up a little bit. The one way I have found sort of just make this process a little bit easier is just by rocking your sort of string or so like in this case thread, just sort of rocking it back and forth a little bit. I find that means then you get a better sort of line from it. You don't get like a gappy line. So you can see I'm just going over some of those first ones I did just to see if I can make it sort of again into more of a solid line. So this is going to create a really sort of fun background. You could use this sort of like a watercolour background, like an underwater colour background. But I'm really going to sort of fill this up and just create something that I think is just a little bit different. But you can see as it's drying, so specifically those few lines you've got at the top, they are kind of still got that little blue sort of tint to it, but obviously they are a lot lighter, and it's sort of like taking that colour away from it. So again, just creating a really fun background. And I think something like this, particularly because we have used those blue tones, I think it would be perfect for a masculine card. So as you can see, I'm just sort of working my way around just in sort of random places. I don't want it to be too uniform or sort of too perfect. I'm happy with some of the lines aren't sort of solid lines. You've got almost like dashes and dots within there. And I'm just trying to cross over as much as possible, sort of have some on the diagonal, again, just to create a little bit more interest. So you can see I'm doing quite a lot without sort of putting it back in the water, because again, where it starts to have sort of lesser water on the twine, it means then that you will get sort of different kinds of lines and make it more interesting. So you can see here we've just done a few more, and again you can see some of them are sort of becoming a lot lighter than others, and it's just creating a little bit more depth. And using those different tones, so the different ink pads together, just creates a little bit more interest. Again, gives it that gradient look, but again, I just think it looks a lot more interesting. So you could do as many or as little as you want to create a background like this. Obviously, every single one you're going to do is going to be completely different. And I like that because it means then you're not sort of structuring yourself or limiting yourself on the type of sort of end result that you get. So once you're happy with your background, I'm just going to go ahead and just heat set this so I can just make a card out of this really quick. So this entire background really didn't take very long to make at all. So if you're looking for a really quick card and you want to still make your own backgrounds, I think this is sort of perfect. So like I said, just using my heat tool here just to sort of dry off some of those areas. So for the rest of the card, we're just going to keep it really simple. We're just going to pop a sentiment on it. So this is the sentiment we're going to be using, and I'm going to be heat embossing this with some white embossing powder onto some black cardstock. So the first thing I'm going to do is just following the same process I always do. First, start off with my anti-static bag, and that will just stop the embossing powder from sticking to anything other than sort of my sticky ink that I'm going to stamp down. I'm using my emboss ink pad, and I'm just going to press that down a couple of times just to make sure that I get sort of all of the words in there and I get a really nice sort of crisp image once I've popped my embossing powder on there. So like I said a couple of times, this is what I find perfect for your stamping platform, because if there is a tiny little bit that you miss, it's not the end of the world, because you can just go back in there and restamp it. So like I said, I'm going to heat emboss this with some white embossing powder. So I'm just going to be using my Paper Mania. This is the Seafoam white colour, pretty much what I always use. And I'm just going to go ahead and heat set that again with the heat tool, so just very basic heat embossing. So once you've finished heat embossing this, you can go ahead and obviously cut it down exactly how you want it to. So I'm just going to cut just a little bit off the sides just to give it a nice little black border sort of around the outside. So now here's our background, and then we've got our sentiment we're going to pop on top. And again, I think this creates a really sort of nice, fun, masculine card. Again, you could change up the colour scheme, and you could make lots of different cards, for everybody pretty much. But I wanted to give it something a little bit extra. So the same thread that I've used to create our background, I've actually got some in a light blue colour. So again, sticking to my blue theme. And all I'm going to do is kind of wind this around the card in the same sort of pattern and style that we have sort of created the background. So just put a piece of double-sided tape on the back, and that's going to hold my thread in place. So the one thing you want to make sure with this is that you don't sort of pull it so tight where it sort of curves your card, and then it won't sort of lie flat when you put it on your card base. So you can see here, I'm just making sure that all of my thread that comes across the back is going to go and stick to that piece of double-sided tape, because obviously I don't want it to come undone. So we're going to do it again. So this is that sort of thread that's made up of sort of 5 individual threads, and all I've done is taken them apart. So this is just using, I think, 1 or 2 threads, and then on the next one I can use the other 3. So we're just creating something a little bit different and using different sort of thicknesses of thread, again, to make it a little bit more interesting. So all I'm trying to do is just sort of spread them out a little bit. I don't want it to be sort of too clumped together, but like I said, I'm going to go ahead and just pop a little bit more thread on it, because I want it to be really, really nice and full. So you don't have to do this. Like I said, I think this just kind of finished the card off nicely, just gave it a little bit more interest and kind of tied in really nicely with that background that we have created. So again, using different kinds of string again or thread like this will work perfectly. You know, and again, I'm not making it too sort of symmetrical or, you know, perfect. I want it to be sort of as random as our background is. And like I said, I think it works really well. So again, using that double-sided tape to hold down that thread on the back will just stop any pieces sort of coming loose. I have made sort of 2 of these cards. One of them I used double-sided tape, so I stuck it flat to my card base. For this particular one, I'm going to use some foam pads just to raise it up. So if you're going to do that, make sure then you are sticking down your thread or your ribbon or whatever it is sort of well onto the card, just so it stays stuck and doesn't come undone. So like I said, I'm just going to use some big foam pads. So with the 2 cards that I did make, I did actually prefer it sticking this bit flat onto the card, and then I used some foam tape to put down the sentiment. I would definitely do it that way around rather than the way I'm doing it now, but obviously, you know, the cards still end up looking pretty much exactly the same. So again, just some foam pads just all over the back just to support it. And then we can go ahead and stick this onto our blank card base. So the size of this card is 6x4, so sort of on the smaller side, but a really sort of nice size birthday card that you can send out through the post. So I'm just going to pop that down, and that'll just give us a nice little white border around the outside of our card. So you can see I've just turned it over there because I want to have that lighter blue at the top and then the darker shade of blue at the bottom, so it really does give it that nice sort of gradient look. So once you're happy with that stuck down, I'm going to go ahead and stick the sentiment down. Like I said, I just stick this flat down, but on the other card I used the foam pads, which I think just looked a little bit better. But by putting then this sentiment on top, that means then it's just holding down our thread, and it's just going to keep it exactly where we've placed it, and we're not going to worry about it moving or sort of coming apart at all. So once we've stuck down our sentiment, that really is it for this card. So it's a really quick and easy card. I really enjoyed sort of only using one particular colour palette. The previous card I did a yellow background, and that was a watercolour background that I created. I think it's fun just to kind of challenge yourself and limit yourself a little bit to only using sort of one colour palette. Again, so I've used a colour with black and white, so keeping it very simple, and I think the results are really, really nice. So that's our finished card for today. So I hope you enjoyed that background. I hope it might give you a little bit of inspiration to have a go at it yourself. If you like this video, then please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any future videos. So I think the next background colour I'm going to be using is going to be red. So again, subscribe if you want to make sure you check out that video as soon as it gets posted. Thanks very much for watching, and happy crafting.